I knew when I was 11 that I wanted to be a musician. I mean, it was definitely something very, very young that I just felt like this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Um, and I think if you don't have that burning desire in your heart, there's uh, enough of the obstacles along the way will cause you to leave it. Um, but and kind of how I got into music, it wasn't even anything great. It's not like, I mean, we sang in church as a family. I came from a big family. We would always sing in the car. But it wasn't like we were going to concerts or anything. It was just music was just kind of an organic part of our life. And my older brother was in middle school band. And so I would go to his concerts and I was like, nobody plays the oboe. I'll do that.
Okay.
Um, and and then I actually, I loved the sound. Um, and it was only after I kind of fell in love with the oboe that I started listening to orchestral music and picking out the oboe, and the beautiful oboe solos. And, that's one of the funnest parts about playing the oboe is just all of the expressive lines that the composers wrote.
Something that came to my mind, I have to ask you this. How do you deal with oboe jokes?
Oh, you laugh at them because they're funny and they're true.
So when I studied music, when I started my musical education, I was quite young, and the way it went was uh, in Poland at that time, it was a different social system. So in many ways, we had the comfort of not competing in terms of other life options because there were not that many.
Yeah.
At the same time, when we got into the studies, one thing that absolutely appeared to me as true is that music is such a general term, but there's so much of it that you can slice it and dice it and pull out something that really connects with you. Case in point, I for the longest time, I was absolutely mesmerized by some aspects of organ music and organ concertos in particular. The Handel ones, but also some others. And I was young, but I was fascinated by what it does to my emotion. You know, and I think that right now, my journey continues through other music like Bach and maybe Beethoven and Wagner, which we've done recently. But can you tell me tell us a little bit more about your musical journey in that sense?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that. One of the beautiful things about music is that it's a bottomless ocean. So the composers that I listened to when I was a high school student, was a lot more of Aaron Copland, Tchaikovsky, and then, going into school, Dvorak, Shostakovich, um, and then studying more oboe specific things, you just dive into Bach. And while I was in graduate school, actually, one of the most enjoyable activities I did was singing in the church choir, in an Anglican church choir, and singing, all of this beautiful high church music. Um, I've always really enjoyed opera, but I've loved getting to perform so many operas because it's such a high art form. It brings together so many, singing, acting, dancing, musicians. Um, and so there's so much in each opera to study too. And so it's as my musical journey has, or my musical career has progressed, what I've studied and listened to and enjoyed listening to has changed too. And sometimes you go through phases where you really study chamber music, and that's fascinating too because it's such an intimate sound. And I feel like composers take more chances in their chamber music because because they can.
Oh, it's also purity of the sonority. I think that
Yeah.
when you do a chamber music piece, let's say in a kind of string quartet or any other group of that sort, you have as a musician, you have an absolute control over every aspect of that performance.
Yeah.
And when you sit down and play a symphony, well, you still control what you control, but particularly on the string side, that control is diminished because of the company of others.
Yeah.
Um, I, I remember it very well, our project that we've done when we played all the Brandenburg Concerti.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Well, and that sort of is exactly what the chamber music and the sort of the intimate expression of chamber music presents. And at the same time, it is quite a challenging orchestral project because the instrumentation of these concerti is so, it changes so much that every one of
Yeah.
them is so much different. But from the projects of the virtuosi, which ones do you remember with most fond memories?
Well, actually, it was the Bach cantata that we did. I don't even remember what number it was, but it was Giacomo came out from Italy,
Yeah,
and it was with Christian and Christiana.
yeah.
That Bach cantata was one of my favorite performances we've ever done. Just because Bach knew how to write for the oboe and just really express the vocal qualities of the oboe line. And when you just get to sing through your instrument like that, it's so satisfying. And also getting to perform the Tristan English horn solo. I remember learning that piece right after school for it was actually for an audition. The English horn solo was one of the, it was actually the solo excerpt for the English horn portion of the audition. And I remember thinking, this is one of the hardest things I've ever played in my life, and um, there was a misconception among students that all of the learning you're going to do as a musician you have to do in school, because once you're out in the professional world you have to be playing. And it's like, no, you actually really grow as a musician in your professional career. And so that was something that was really satisfying to come back to it 15 years after I've graduated, realize how much I've matured as a player and as a musician, and something that was beyond my reach was now accessible and enjoyable to play. And again, one of the most fun performances to do. So that yes, there was nerves in that performance whenever the Act 3 started of the Tristan and Isolde, but being able to just let that go and play the solo freely was a lot of fun.
Oh, you did a beautiful job on that
Thank
solo.
you.
Yeah,
I love the English horn.
Well, how are you coping now with the situation that we are all facing? That is probably the question I'll ask everybody. How are you doing, and how does it affect you both mentally and in any other way you'd like to talk about?
Um, well, one thing that's funny is in the middle of all of the quarantine, I had a baby, and so that's always like a time where I do take a little break in playing. But it's it's important to stay inspired, and it's so one way that I found inspiration is just by continuing to listen to music and follow performances. The When the Met Opera canceled the rest of their season, they announced that they were going to be streaming a different opera every night through their Met HD app, and for free. So I downloaded the app, and I've probably watched at least half of the operas in completion, and then other operas I've watched portions of. But it's just been this amazing study of operatic literature, um, and being able to see some obscure Puccini operas and some different Rossinis, and then multiple productions of Verdi, and how they, how a different singer or different staging kind of changes the mood. So in the absence of being able to attend performances, finding that musical inspiration that way, it's definitely hard to find time to get away and practice when everybody's home.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something I'm like just at the point of recovery, because the baby's almost a month old, and that's right when it's like, okay, I think I can think about playing and blowing and using my ab muscles again to do something like that. So just a general comment, one thing that having kids has helped me do is be very intentional about my practice time, and no time is wasted when I practice. So it's like I can accomplish in an hour what used to take me 2 or 3 hours, when it's like, oh, let me do this, let me do this. It's like, no, I approach my practice with a very focused, like, I'm going to do this and this and this and make sure that this is happening. So yeah, when I am back to playing in about a week or two, it will be it might be shorter times than I would prefer, but it will be very very productive times. And the kids also know that, because my husband's a musician too, that it's like mom and dad play and they need times to practice, and if mom and dad don't get that practice time, then nobody's happy. So just having that expectation in our family too helps. So
Yeah. Well, I hope that we will find a way in this craziness uh, to inspire our audiences again soon.
yeah.
I will look up and see if we can release some of the cantata concert to the public.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Because we do have the recordings of that, and I hope that we sit and play as soon as possible.
Yeah. Well, and one thing, by watching the amazing, no expense spared productions that the Met does, it's really enjoyable to watch those, but I still feel like opera is best experienced live. And
Right.
so it's like it makes me appreciate what we do too, because the music is so beautiful. Often it speaks to itself, and even some of the Met stagings have very simple sets, um, and some simple stagings too, and the music is so powerful that it still so much speaks. So I know the bigger productions are going to be a little ways down the road, but I can't wait till we can bring opera back too, because that's something that really is best experienced live.
Well, I always thought that money is always is an expression of a value.
Yeah.
Money itself, it's worth nothing. You can't eat it, can't wear it. You really can't do much with it if it's not valuable. But so, in my approach to what we are trying to do, I always try to find a way to be creative without the requirement of huge budget.
Mhm.
Because case in point, our Wagner production, the recent one, came out quite nicely, and it was done with very simple resources. But I've been to so many theater productions. When I was in my studies in Poland, I would attend almost a theater or an opera or a concert, but theatrical works a lot, and almost every day. And I've seen what can be done absolutely with nothing sometimes.
Mhm.
Now, case in point, in our production of La Boheme in Act 3, we basically cleaned up the stage because that act is all about losing everything.
Yeah.
And you don't need really that much. I mean, you have to indicate a door, but that's it. Uh, and that was powerful because that emptiness is exactly what audience needs to see.
Yeah.
In Wagner production, we used one big piece of fabric that was huge. but it indicated this almost bondage between the two people, that they fight each other, but they cannot.
Cannot live without the other one.
Yes, it's a conflict that binds them, and it worked.
Yeah.
So theater is not about big money, and I actually believe that the more intimate, of course, you need some resources to make it work, but you have to look at the spirit work. You have to look at the connection, and the other thing is, I think that we speak with the creators through time, through the score. So we have to sort of ask that question, okay, but what is it that it's here and it's important? And a lot of it is through music, of course, but then you look at the theatrical aspects of it as well. So I think that's why it connects, and that's why we succeeded so far. But
and they're universal stories. That's why opera still, exists. And it's funny, reading about a lot of the stories of the operas. Many of them the composers were inspired by a play that they saw, and the play is no longer performed, but the opera is.
Yes, because the composer added the layer of emotion that is embedded in the score.
Yeah.
For example, one of my favorite operas is Onegin by Tchaikovsky.
That's been one of my favorite productions to revisit. It was, and that was again also a very simple production that they did, but then the music spoke through, and you were able to realize how gorgeous Tchaikovsky wrote it.
But for me, for example, because I come from that part of the world, it does speak somewhat in my language, if you know what I mean. The nostalgia of Tchaikovsky's, of Onegin, is exactly the nostalgia that I need for my comfort,
Yeah.
And similarly, I can see how, for example, some American operas would be, for Americans, would be more close to their heart, because it reflects who we as a society are.
Well, and one thing that's been interesting is, I think one reason why Puccini is so popular is because a lot of American film and early musical theater composers, even like Andrew Lloyd Webber, like took the language of Puccini and have reworked it in, film music and Phantom of the Opera and all this stuff. And so it's a very American sound, and I think that's why Americans are very drawn to Puccini.
Yes, I think so too. But I also think that Puccini was very American in his thinking and in his way of life. Verdi was a musician, politician, and he was considered a hero he is considered a hero for Italians, not because, now of course because he was a great composer, but also because he was involved in politics on the right side of things. But Puccini was much more commercial.
Yeah.
Puccini wrote those operas to make money, and he did, and he
And he
succeeded.
did.
And he was very capitalist about it, and he was great, but certainly on a different side of sort of culture. So maybe that's why he really goes straight to the point of humanity, rather than he bypasses all the politics.
Yeah.
So that's why it works. Okay, Johanna, be well, and thank you again, and all the best to you and the family and the kids. We love you, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thanks, Johanna. Bye-bye.